1993 for his development of one of the most widely used current techniques in molecular biology today, the PCR, or polymerase chain reaction. This revolutionary technique allows scientists to take a sample containing a very minute amount of DNA and replicate that DNA sequence until there are many copies. One of the first applications of PCR was to analyze human tissue in the presence of HIV. PCR is commonly used in medical and biological research labs for the detection of virus culture in infectious persons.
The people that are AIDS researchers now are getting neurotic if you ask them any questions. There was a time when I first started asking questions, all I wanted was papers. Just tell me the papers that you read that convince you that HIV was the cause of AIDS, because I need to reference those papers in some of those. I was working
Gallo
on
worked
tests for HIV with
Fauci. I finally found a video where Carrie Mullis just happened to die this August. The maker of PCR, who was ticked that Fauci was using PCR to test for HIV and calling HIV AIDS. So both those things. But he said the PCR is a method, or it's a mechanism that is not meant to diagnose viruses. It's to be used in forensics and certain scientific applications, but not for diagnosing, well, at least virus. And that's exactly what we're using right now for the swab tests, the DNR, to get DNR and test for virus, coronavirus. Anyhow, finally, in here, Fauci, I believe, was head of the NIH at this point, and he did a number on this. This is 18 minutes. I'm just going to play a few minutes. Fauci used the PCR to claim that HIV caused AIDS, not fully proving it, but claiming it, come up with AZT as a treatment, which is a chemotherapeutic drug, which failed for cancer treatment, and it just basically made people sick and die. And he's in here he does explain that he believes the AIDS is many different retroviruses. It's a lifestyle. Well, and not only that, hepatitis B vaccines, special ones, were given to gay men in New York City, San Francisco, and parts of Africa. And so when women and children got AIDS, they said, see, it's not a gay man's disease. Women and children get it, but it was primarily through tainted blood. And this ties right in to what we're dealing with right now. They called AIDS a pandemic back then. Fauci wanted a pandemic. The CDC wanted a pandemic. And they got it with AIDS. They got like billions, I'm sure billions of dollars.
Yes, they are. And I needed to write
for studying
a little report to the NIH to say, here's the progress
for a cure
made.
for AIDS.
And the first line of it was, HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. And I thought that was true. This is before I got involved. And I said, what's the reference for that quote? And I looked for it for about 2 or 3 years and I never could find it. And by the end of 2 years, I'd ask everybody at every meeting that I'd gone to that talked about AIDS, I'd ask, I'd look through the computer database.
My screen's
There is
messing up.
no reference. There is nobody who should get credit for that statement. Now, that's a pretty weird situation in science, where getting credit for a discovery is the most important thing in your life as a scientist. It's silly to hear people saying, you don't believe that HIV causes AIDS? You don't believe that? I mean, it's just a word, but it's a very, very important distinction. I think that's why it has become a very emotional kind of thing, because people actually
like Corona.
they get personally committed
Yep.
to what really is a body of evidence that can be analyzed, by lots of people. And at this point, there's so much of it out there, nobody can really analyze all of it. But nobody can write a review of it that says HIV causes AIDS because of this.
Listen to this.
If a postdoc were to write a review of the literature that showed without much doubt that HIV was the cause of AIDS, that guy would be famous. Now, there's 100,000 guys out there who have the opportunity. Just 10 years has passed. We've been waiting for this star postdoctoral fella to distinguish himself forever and get a lifelong grant from Tony Fauci, but he hasn't shown up. No one has bothered to
Lifelong
write the
grant from
definitive
Tony
review.
Fauci.
Any journal would take it. That right there proves that HIV does not cause AIDS.
All right.
All at that point. So
The
why?
reason Fauci needs to be exposed is because he's one of the expert, what do they call them? The Corona Task Force experts standing on stage telling America what we can and cannot do because he's a virologist and a specialist, and along with the CDC epidemiologists, and we're not.
I just say, well, it's heterosexually transmitted too, because
But it's really crimes against humanity. This is like no joke. People are dying from protocol right now. People have died all along from AIDS protocol and from the AZT medicine that a particular Anthony Fauci helped push.
that made it a plague, and the CDC needed one. The CDC hadn't had a good plague
Oh.
since polio.
Everybody
Yeah.
seems to trust the CDC too. They were caught committing fraud with the autism MMR link. Posey, Senator Posey, in Congress, exposed it. The news didn't cover it, mainstream or local. Everybody still parrots the, oh no, vaccination and MMR do not cause autism. That was debunked. That one doctor was a liar. Doesn't matter if the doctor was a liar or not. The evidence is there, and he wasn't actually, but the evidence is all there that they did fraud. The one, was it Thompson, I forget the other guy's name. He got a confession from the CDC worker. Yes, we shredded papers that proved that from the studies that proved that there was a link between the MMR and autism.
Funding was probably going to be cut back if they didn't come up with one. The guy that was the head of the CDC, in fact, wrote memos that have been obtained, where he describes this as hot stuff. Those guys have got an agenda.
These are the people running our nation and our health care in our nation. Or CDC running the show, setting protocol, and the CDC is following the World Health Organization, of whom the leader of the World Health Organization, Tedros, is not a doctor, and he committed genocide on his fellow Ethiopians. And they're, okay, we'll hire him to be the head of the World Health Organization. And then Dr. Ryan, or Michael Ryan, from the World Health Organization, is the one who said, Corona is going to move from the street into the home. And pretty soon we're going to have to go into the homes and remove people who are infected in a dignified manner. We already got, I don't know how much money set aside, in New York, for contact tracers and Army, and Bloomberg helping to fund it. This fund's just begun, and people are, masked up and following along.
Is not what we would like them to have, being that we pay for them to take care of our health in some way. The scientists, like you say, they are considered the final arbiters of what's good for the planet.
I love what he says right here. And like I say, he just died in August. I had no idea he just died. I just knew that he was the maker of the PCR and said it's not to be used to diagnose viruses, which it is being used right now for corona, with a lot of false positives. If you look and you do a search on YouTube, you'll just see that it's false negative. No, there's a lot of false positive with it, and there's problems with the antibody test. There's problems with all three tests. But this where he says he likens it to a religion, it is so true. So all the people following along their government, trusting their government, it's because they're not trusting in God. That's all I can figure out. If they're trusting in God, they would know that their government's lying, and that governments have always lied, and governments do not care about health.
It's bad for the planet. And they haven't got the slightest idea. Instead of wearing white robes, they wear white lab coats, Instead of bringing you the word of God, they bring you the word of the EPA or whatever. And they don't have to understand what it is that they're making you do, in fact. And people, I think they fall naturally into it because there is a need in humanity for something like a religion. Something that makes you feel a part of some larger kind of group.
Yeah.
Something that you think, in spite of your wormy little life, makes you a part of something good, something big.
Trouble is, and that is Gary Null interviewing Carrie Mullis, and this is probably shortly before he died. But what he's saying, yeah, people like, I learned the hard way that all religions, they are all man-made. You want to have faith. You want to have faith and trust in the Lord, and all you need is a Bible, a good one, a KJV. But only because all the newer ones since then, they really do add, omit, and twist. But if any book needs to be accurate, you'd think it's Scripture. And it's not that hard to understand thee and thou and shalt. This is amazing. And now he's going to interview this other doctor that has been driven away, who helped with cancer tests.
Beliefs get tangled up with facts, matters of fact, become matters of religious kind of significance, where if somebody gets mad at you for asking him a question in a scientific meeting, or says, we're never going to have Carrie Mullis at the European Union of...
Ask some doctors about vaccines. Ask a doctor, ask a pediatrician why they think it's all right to inject children with neurotoxic adjuvants in the vaccines. See what kind of reaction you can get 9 out of 10 times.
Whatever kind of scientist, so they put it in nature, because he came in there and had the audacity to tell people that it might not be that bad to have sex. That AIDS might not be something you get from sex. That I don't see any evidence for it, is all I said. I don't see any evidence for it. What? You can't tell young people that.
Today, there are many scientists and physicians working within the conventional institutions who have similar viewpoints to those of the dissidents. Well, why don't they come out? Why don't they speak their minds? Is it possible that they take a look at what has happened when you do question the HIV equals AIDS equals death hypothesis? They've been suppressed. Dr. Peter Duesberg, noted scientist, was the main person in the line of fire.
Peter is a very scholarly person, in addition to being brilliant too. He's very careful. He doesn't say anything that he can't support. And also one of the most brilliant people surely the most brilliant virologist.
Peter Duesberg at the University of California Berkeley campus is seen as someone who is now dangerous. His funding has been cut off. Graduate students are encouraged not to take his courses, and I think his administrative duties have included being in charge of the department picnic.
My funding, for example, from the National Institute.
See, that goes to show you not only the politics. There should not be politics in math or science, and especially in the health field, but that's all there is. It's all politics and lies. Climate change. There's a lot of scientists who will tell you the truth about it, but no, somehow the world, people in charge of the world, get to control who gets to talk about climate change, who gets to talk about if they're, the chem spraying, solar management, on and on. But when it comes to our health, and when it comes to vaccines and mandating and the medicine, it's criminal. It's all criminal.
Health will not be renewed as of this year, and I may be out of business then. Also, my colleagues have essentially excommunicated me. I'm not invited to meetings, or hardly ever to meetings anymore. Not ever to one on AIDS. I'm not allowed to publish in the same journals anymore as I used to.
Not allowed to publish.
As a member of the National Academy, I cannot publish in the National Academy my views that drugs may be the cause of AIDS. And I have plenty of evidence to support it, to document my claim, which might be very relevant to the health of millions of Americans.
I can't hear what he's saying.
That drugs may be the cause of AIDS.
Drugs.
My views that drugs may be the cause of AIDS.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Hepatitis B vaccine given.
To document my claim
is an experiment like our CIA likes to do.
Americans and people on this planet.
Operation Paperclip is alive and well. Nazi scientists running the show. and they're all involved in the corona pandemic and the protocol and the cure and the vent death protocol
National Academy
and blocking the medicines that work, especially anything natural. Your vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D levels being up, the chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine in New York. Cuomo had the nerve to tell all the pharmacists in New York, if any patient comes in with a prescription for the chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, you call that doctor and you ask them why it was being prescribed. If it's being prescribed for coronavirus, do not fill that prescription. So there you go. Our governor became a leading health expert.
ideas that drugs may be the cause of AIDS. And I have plenty of evidence to support it, to document my claim, which
So-
might be very relevant to the health.
Jumping around. So for anybody that would be cured or saved from that cheap drug, too bad, so sad. You get a ventilator that will